Hey everyone, so SBI just dropped the content overview for 2022, the things that we're going to look to implement and change. So in this video, I'm just going to give a quick rundown of the things coming for Albion in 2022 and sort of my thoughts and opinions on them. So starting off, I'm just going to give a quick rundown of the content that's coming, starting with the quality of life stuff and then the actual new content updates. So starting with the quality of life, the first thing that they're doing is reworking the guild finder as it stands right now. If you open up the guild page and you don't have a guild, it's sort of a nightmare to find a guild that way. It's pretty much all done through Discords and other social platforms. So having a reworked guild finder should be amazing and is much needed. So this is a really good quality of life change coming in. Next, we have more guides and tips built into the game for new players. So for example, a tip to like how to avoid gankers and what to look out for, things like that, to sort of help new players get into the full loot content a little bit easier. Overall, a nice little change or update, as there's no real quest line or other things that really helps you get acquainted with some of the things in the game. Third, we have auto loadouts when killed. So when you get killed in the black zone or something, the gear that you're equipping will be automatically saved as a loadout, making it easier to re-gear. Lastly, for quality of life, this can sort of maybe go into content, but there are trophies now for defeated enemies. So if you defeat a guild or a player, you'll somehow be able to get a trophy that you can put on your personal island or something to memorialize the event. Moving on to the content updates now, I'm just going to give a brief rundown of what they're planning to implement, and then after I'll give my thoughts and opinions on just a couple of them that I think are the most important or interesting. So the first thing that they're looking to do is to update some of the weapon lines, mostly the caster weapon lines, mostly with new visuals and things like that, although it does sound like they're going to be adding or reworking some of the abilities as well. Personally, I can't speak to this too much as I really don't like casting-based weapons, so I rarely play with them. Next, castles and castle outposts are getting reworked, so the chests in the outposts are going to spawn more dynamically and they're going to be announced on the maps. Their intention is to have more fights throughout the day for outpost treasures. Castles are also getting a change to their layout and gameplay. Third, we have changes coming to the roads of Avalon with new content and better rewards. Their intention is to make the roads of Avalon more suited for small groups to play in. Similarly, they're also adding new content found within the roads, which are mists, which are zones specifically for solo players and solo players only. These sound pretty similar as to the normal roads, except more geared towards solo players, as they have gathering, charging mobs, treasures, mob camps, and other open world activities. Next, they're reworking the portals that lead to the Black Zone, instead replacing them with fortified outland cities, which include things like the markets from the cities and the chests from the cities, so it'll be easier to sort of access the Black Zone. They're also looking to add more gameplay events similar to, say, the Bandit Assault that increase the rewards of certain activities randomly in throughout the game. This includes both crafting events, so for example leather chest pieces might give a crafting bonus for a certain amount of time, and PvP events, so for example Hellgates might give better loot or better fame for a certain amount of time. Next, they're looking to rework gathering gear to be IP dependent and reworking some of the abilities found on gathering armor. Along with this, they also seem to be interested in adding tomes for gathering, similar to how you can get tomes for combat fame. Lastly, Crystal League is getting some changes. They are very vague about exactly what it's going to look like, but it looks like they're moving away from full loot PvP for some of the matches in the tournament and league qualification, but still having some high-risk full loot matches available. Okay, so getting into my personal thoughts and opinions, first we have the castle/outpost rework, and to be honest, this just sort of sounds bad. I'm really skeptical about how successful this is going to be and what they're doing with it. So what they said is that outpost chests are going to be more dynamic and announced on the map. Now I'm guessing here because there's no real details, but from the sounds of it, dynamic was the same word that they used when updating the Outlands treasures, which used to be static spawns similar to what outposts are like right now. If they want to change these outpost treasures to being more dynamic, that makes me think they're going to look more like Outlands chests in that they spawn randomly and you can see them on the map when they're going to spawn. Now obviously we're going to have to see how these are different from Outlands chests, just besides having some guards that kill and them being controlled by a guild, but my biggest problem with the Outlands chests is that they are dynamic. I think that's a massive issue. The biggest issue with the Lands Awakened update is that the spawns of objectives are random. cores, vortexes, chests spawn randomly, but spawn rates aren't high enough to make it so that they are often contesting each other. If objectives aren't contesting each other's via timers or something like that, then it just promotes this super Zergy behavior because you can just go out as a Zerg and get everything as a Zerg. As it is right now, you rarely have to choose between getting a chest or getting a core because usually they at least have a couple minutes in between their spawns, and so you can just get one and then go and get the other one as well. If they change Outpost to being random spawns like this as well, the exact same thing is going to happen and Zergs are just going to dominate them. Right now, being them popping all at the same timer, a smaller group can take an outpost from a very large group if they're smart about it and dodge the Zergs. If a really large group wants to ensure with 100% accuracy that they ensure more than one outpost, they have to split up, and that's a good thing because it allows smaller groups to either fight a small portion of that Zerg or just get an objective. So for that reason, I'm really skeptical about the outpost changes, but I could be completely wrong and it could be completely different from what I'm imagining, but if they do make it random spawned, it's just going to be another form of Zerged content. For the castle changes, I'm not as sure. Obviously, we don't have a lot of details, and I don't really do that much castles, but from what I understand, people really enjoy and like castle fights, so I don't really know why they're changing them, but again, I could be wrong. I don't do a whole lot of castles. Looking at the upcoming Roads of Avalon changes, this update is so unbelievably overdue. I'm happy it's finally happening, but SBI, what the hell have you been doing for the last year? In my opinion, the Roads of Avalon have the single greatest potential out of any content in Albion. They are so unbelievably full of potential for amazing content, especially for small groups, which is like what a lot of players play this game for, but right now are just completely dead. So hopefully this change is good and fixes the glaring issues that the roads have. It sounds like their intention is good on improving small group play, but this is really one that we're going to have to wait and see. I really hope that this update does wonders for the roads because, again, they have so much potential and this could really be like the highlight of Albion is the roads, instead of the roads being just non-existent content. Similar to the Roads of Avalon, getting the Mists of Avalon, which are essentially what it sounds like solo player roads. And these I don't think will be amazing. These won't be like the solo player's dream where all the solo players can live happily ever after. At best they'll be okay, probably slightly better than Corrupted Dungeons, and at worst they'll be even worse, more dead than the roads are right now. And the reason I say this is partly just so that I don't get my own hopes up just for them to be shattered when it flops, and partly because of SBI's track record with solo content and managing new content, and partly because Albion isn't a game made for solo players, and so when you try to create an instant solo environment, it just gets exploited. Let me explain what I mean by this and why I think this. Basically, most of Albion's player base plays primarily to win, and so they exploit anything they can to do so. A perfect example is Corrupted Dungeons have had almost exclusively horribly unfun metas, but everyone runs them anyways because they can win by doing so. But despite that, SBI does very little to address these sort of issues that come up. Partly because Albion's a game that's core systems, like for example the gear system, is more built around group play than solo, and so it's just genuinely really difficult to fix a lot of these issues without throwing something else completely out of whack. But also partly because SBI just simply doesn't spend the resources on that sort of stuff. It does not seem to be a big priority to them. Basically, all of this is to say that there's a ton of different ways that this could go very wrong very easily with very little response from SBI to try to change it. Just imagine if these were to get introduced today, you just have like 10 bloodletter rats with minor work boots in every single road you went to. So basically, all of this leads me to believe that the Mist will be alright at best. Hopefully they'll be okay, but I highly doubt that they're going to be this great, amazing thing for solo players. Another thing to quickly note about the introduction of the mists is that solo players are likely going to get a lot more shunning like they did when the Corrupted Dungeons came out, as anytime solo players have any sort of feedback or want the game to be better in some way, everyone's just going to say, get back in your mists or get back in your Corrupted Dungeons, because those are the things that solo players should do and nothing else. Remember when solo dungeons got changed to be undiveable and solo players were like, I want this back, and everyone else is like, if you want 1v1 PvE, just go to Corrupted Dungeon. Yeah, a lot more of that's probably gonna happen. I just want to quickly touch on the reworking of the portals and the sort of the black zone, the new towns and stuff like that. Right now, I think this is just going to be a very, very helpful change. Obviously, there's definitely ways they could implement it that would really make things awkward and add too much safety to the black zones, but as it currently stands, portal zones are a complete mess. Like, honestly, they're a mess. They're super confusing. They make content around them just so unbelievably awkward. And especially for new players trying to get into the black zone, the portal zones are a nightmare, and so hopefully these new towns within the black zone will be helpful for that. Lastly on the list, we have gameplay events, and overall I'm really excited for these, and I think they should be a really good change. One of the problems with like the current events like the Bandit Assault is that you can't really plan around it or like go and plan to do it. For example, if a guild wants to do a Bandit Assault that day, they can't really like set a plan for it and have everybody meet at a certain time like normal events happen. But if a guild wants to do an open world roam and set it up as a certain time and date, they can do that easily because the events that happen in the open world spawn often enough that you're pretty much guaranteed to have events to do and get content. So even if a guild prefers doing Bandit Assault to roaming the open world, it's just so much easier to roam the open world because you can plan for it. So similarly, by increasing the amount of events that happen in the game, it will allow guilds to be more flexible in their planning and like do more sorts of content because they can sort of set a time and day and say, we're going to do whatever event is happening at this time. Also, more importantly, along with this, it just increases the amount of reliable content that people can get in the game. For example, if there's a Hellgate event, sometimes doing Hellgates can be pretty rough because it takes a while to find an opponent, but if there's an event going on, even people that don't really like Hellgates or do them that often will probably be doing them, allowing you to get faster matches and more content faster and easier, which is just great for everybody. The only real downside I see to this is as you move people around, you just naturally leave other areas empty. So for example, if there's a Hellgate event, there will be less people doing crystals. If there's an open world event, there will be less people doing faction. So if you really like those other activities, you might find sort of a heavy lack of content during similar events. So if you're not a very flexible player and only really like your one or two activities, this update might be a little bit rough because depending on what event is currently going on at the time, you're either going to have a lot of content or like no content. Okay, so that's all the things I wanted to cover in this video. Do you agree with me? Do you not agree with me? Let me know in the comments. Overall, 2022 should be interesting. I'd say I'm overall excited despite my worries about a lot of the content coming in, but hopefully it's a good year for Albion.